Hi, I'm Umbreon Libris, and this is not a usual redesign video. About 3 months ago, I decided that I wouldn't make redesign videos every single month like I used to. I still do the redesigns themselves, the live streams, every month on the last Saturday, but instead of immediately editing it down and posting the video of it the very next Friday, I decided to try covering them in batches, similar to how I do the new 151 videos. 3 redesigns at a time, or maybe a little bit more if there's multiple Pokemon getting redesigned at the same time. I'm still going to show you the process, but I'm going to narrate over it with what I was thinking, and we'll go through it a little bit more quickly. Today we're covering the 3 most recent redesigns, Aipom and Ambipom, Stonjourner, and DUSKNOIR. But before we get started, there's one more thing I want to tell you. If you watch the streams, you already know this, but for those of you who don't, I think it's important to highlight that I'm not trying to imitate any kind of official Pokemon art style anymore, at least not with this series. When I started the redesign series, I was trying to imitate the style from the official art of Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and then earlier this year I switched to the modern official art style from main series games. I'm not doing those anymore. I was struggling with the idea of always trying to imitate another art style and never finding one that was really my own. Like, not necessarily something that was totally unique or original or anything like that, but just me doing my own thing. So I actually did a stream where I tried to work out what that style would look like, and I made this portrait of a Noivern and Sylveon fusion. I was really happy with how that turned out, and so I decided that to keep practicing and refining my approach, I would do the redesigns in that style. So the final art here won't have very much of the Pokemon aesthetic, but that is totally intentional. All right, let's start with Aipom. The main problems with Aipom and Ambipom are their faces and their tail hands. Their fixed glare and frozen grin can look pretty creepy, depends a little bit on the execution, and their tail hands just don't look very dexterous. They almost look like overinflated rubber gloves. Those were the main things I wanted to fix, so this is going to be a relatively minimal redesign. My patron Jaeger showed me this spider monkey Fakemon he designed as a possible reference, and I loved the shape of the hands, so I wanted to take a similar approach with Aipom, but it took a while to get it to look right. Turns out, hands on tails isn't the most natural looking thing. The face was relatively simple to fix, to just make it look a little bit less forced, but it also took a few rounds of nudges to get it just right. The spiky fur at the base of the tail, which is similar to what original Ambipom has, helped make the transition from tail to hand. And that was basically it for Aipom because I kept the colors from the original. Simple, but I think effective. Ambipom was in very much the same vein, although there was a lot more to fix about the face, like the weird hairline and the skeletal nose. I also wanted to make the arms even more understated to really emphasize how Ambipom doesn't use them at all. I swapped Ambipom's 2 strands of hair for a single big tuft, almost like a mohawk, to be more in line with Aipom's hair. The design of the tail hands was a big struggle, but I really wanted to give them proper thumbs to again emphasize their dexterity. In the end, I made Ambipom point its thumbs at itself in a cocky gesture that helps sell its confident and cool new look. The colors are once again very similar to the original, but the pinkish orange that was used on Ambipom's fingers, I instead used for some of its hair. Now the fingers don't look swollen anymore, and it helps make the color scheme more varied and interesting. Even gives the impression of dyed hair, which I think adds to the cool guy aura of it. Shading is where I made a mistake with Aipom and Ambipom. The style I was going for is very high contrast, and that's on purpose, but I probably shouldn't have used white as the highlight color on the purple parts of the body, because it made them look shiny and almost plasticky, which was not intentional. But overall, I'm still quite happy with how they both turned out. I've always kinda liked Aipom, but I never liked Ambipom at all, and this version makes me like Aipom a bit more, and I even like this Ambipom enough that I might have considered adding it to a team. It just has so much personality and doesn't look awkward at all anymore. Next, let's have a look at Stonjourner. The idea of a Stonehenge Pokemon was pretty solid, but the execution is weak. The face is a bit too silly, it has enormous, unwieldy legs that it can't even bend, and it has these arms, or ears, according to some people, that don't seem to have any function and don't add anything to the design. My patron Winged Fig suggested making it almost like a ghost type, like a spirit that possesses and controls the rocks, whereas Kai Sirius offered this almost Conkeldurr-like approach, where the 2 pillars are carried by a floating central slab, and I wanted to use elements of both of those ideas. I wanted it to still look very slab-like at the top, like something that could pass for a Stonehenge structure, at least when standing still, but I also wanted it to have more mobile shoulders, so I used an intermediate slab that could serve both of those roles. This approach worked really well overall, and so the only big challenges were to figure out the face, since I wanted something that looked less silly and more fitting with the Pokemon style than what original Stonjourner has, while still looking recognizably like Stonjourner. And the other big challenge was to work out the runes. Stonjourner's runes don't really have any meaning or function, so we spent a long time thinking of possibilities. Sun and moon, Dynamax clouds, even sword and shield. But the chat and I could not come up with something that looked good without being super on the nose, and that just made sense conceptually. And so in the end, I just went back to the original runes, but carved into the rock rather than embossed out of it. The last challenge was to decide on colors, because I wanted it to have some variety and look like worn out stone. We tried some lichen-y, mossy greens and yellows, dirt brown, and a few combinations of rocky gray. In the end, we settled on mostly gray with just a bit of lichen green. And the Life Force glow on the face and runes we made yellow, because it fit nicely with the rest of the color scheme, although Dynamax red probably would have been more appropriate thematically. I'm super happy with how this one turned out. The pose, the colors, the textures, it all works great for me. The last one we're going to talk about today is, of course, the most recent. We redesigned Dusknoir over Halloween, but as requested by stream viewers, this was not a normal redesign. If I was redesigning Dusknoir normally, I would be trying to improve it as an execution of its basic concept, while still looking at Duskull and Dusclops for context to make sure that they're a coherent evolution line. And that is more or less what I did, except this wasn't the Dusclops that I was looking at. I was looking at this one, the Dusclops redesign I did in May of 2019, and that I still think is one of the most successful redesigns that I have done. I suggest you watch that redesign video to get all the details, but basically I see Duskull as a tiny bird-like Reaper, and so Dusclops is a cloaked and hooded Reaper figure that can open up and fly on its ragged wings. I think this design is pretty much perfect, and I did not come up with it imagining that it would ever evolve, but that was what you guys wanted to see. And creating an evolution for this that would also incorporate elements from the original Dusknoir, because otherwise it wouldn't be a redesign at all, that was a challenge. Another one of my patrons, Jaden, suggested I use an elephant skull because it is a likely origin of Cyclops myths, and it would be a nice way to make it different from Dusclops. So when I tried a bunch of different configurations, trying to preserve both the birdness and the reaperness, while also trying to add something new, I definitely tried the elephant skull. It's even thematically appropriate, considering the idea of elephant graveyards and how elephants are known to mourn their dead. Instead of a stomach mouth like Dusknoir has, I imagined it opening up its entire chest cavity to engulf its victims or prey or whatever they are, with the ribs, which were just a pattern on the Dusclops, now acting almost as teeth for its chest mouth. The bat-like wings were a suggestion from viewer Max Power, and while it does make Dusknoir less bird-like, I think it's very fitting anyway, and the little hands are a good way to evolve my handless Dusclops. I also wanted to keep some reference to Dusknoir communicating with the dead. Apparently the head of OG Dusknoir is supposed to be an antenna that can pick up signals from the other side. I gave up on making an actual antenna, but decided to use the shape of a Ouija board planchette, the triangle with the hole in it that you actually move around, as a simple design motif to reference that ability. The Reaper hood ended up being replaced by a high collar, in part to reference the noir aesthetic, but also to keep making Dusknoir more its own, less like just Dusclops, but different. I drew Dusknoir in 2 different poses to really show off the way it looks as it flies, and its more humanoid standing appearance, which now almost makes it look like Ghost Rider. The colors here were pretty straightforward, very much based on the original Dusknoir, and I think it turned out pretty good. It does feel a bit unnecessary, but that's largely because my design for Dusclops was never meant to evolve. It also doesn't really feel like something Pokemon would do, with the way it mashes the Grim Reaper and birds and bats and elephants and Ouija boards and Ghost Rider. It's probably a bit much, but I do think that it looks good in the end. That's it for today. I would love to hear from you in the comments what you thought of these redesigns. You can also put your redesign suggestions in the comments. I leave the final choice to the stream viewers, but the options that I give them are pulled from the most frequent suggestions that I received. If you want to join me live and help make these happen, the next stream will be on November 28th at noon Pacific time, and we'll be redesigning IceQ. If you subscribe and turn on notifications, you won't miss it. Thank you for watching, and thank you to Ethan from Chicago and all of my other patrons, especially this month's newest patron, Connor, and also Jaden, who actually joined over a month ago, but I forgot to give you your shout out. Sorry about that. If you want to become a patron too, the link is in the description. I'll see you in the next chapter.